creating a video for the very first time using my iPhone. So please excuse the amateur quality and my cat. He might try to get in the picture. I decided to make a video instead of continuing to post on social media because I can communicate more information this way. And I like watching videos on YouTube about some of my favorite topics, including mental health and addiction. And so I think it's a great medium for sharing more information and ideas. The information that I wanted to talk about in this video is inspired by the most recent allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment or assault. Those, specifically those brought against Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh by Christine Blasey Ford and 3 other women. For the last 2 or 3 days, I have been following the news and watching the court hearings and reading people's comments and posts on Facebook and Instagram, and I just find myself emotionally reacting over and over again. And it's because, for many reasons, but mostly because I am a victim of sexual assault and harassment and misconduct and microaggressions and sexism and misogyny and you name it. And I think that all women can relate on some level to this. And to me, that's the real issue here. It's not politics, it's not the legalities, it's that these issues affect so many people, at least half the world's population who are female. So it's a pretty pervasive and ubiquitous topic that's really important. So I wanted to share some information and some ideas on what it is like to be the victim. It's incredibly triggering for people to watch not only the testimony, but then people's reactions to it. It's very painful, and it is very inspiring to watch women come forward, to take the risk and to come forward and to publicly expose themselves vulnerably in the public light. And so the more that women come forward and do this, the more it'll hopefully inspire and encourage and empower other women to come forward and do the same. So that's what I'm doing. So Christine Ford's story resonates so deeply with me, and I know with millions of other women. And I'd like to get into why and what constitutes sexual misconduct, harassment, assault, rape, what behaviors constitute those things, and to shed a light on how frequently these behaviors occur every day, and not just to a handful of people, but to all women in all different sorts of cultures and societies all across the world, throughout history. And if we're going to change these things, then it's important to understand what things they are and and the impact that it has. I'm also interested, and I'd also like for people who don't, for men, I mean, I know men are also victims. So for those who aren't on the receiving end of this stuff, I don't think you understand how frequently it happens and what it's like on what it does to you emotionally. And I just want to shed light on that and hope that you can empathize with those of us who are on the receiving end. I'm also interested in this topic because I'm a mental health counselor and I work with people who struggle with the after effects and the trauma of sexual assault, and also sexism and misogyny. And I hear the stories about the scars it leaves, and those are things that people have to deal with for the rest of their lives. It doesn't just go away. It doesn't just disappear. So I'm going to talk about some things that are based on both my personal life experiences as well as my professional experiences, and I want to articulate specific behaviors that cause psychological pain and trauma for the victims. I want to talk from my positionality, which is I'm a female. I'm a cisgender female. I'm heterosexual. I'm white. I'm in my mid-40s, and so the perpetrators for me are men, heterosexual men primarily. And I know that that's not the case for everyone, but I can only speak from my position. But the resulting trauma and the emotions are equal for anyone who's been the victim. And before I address the specific behaviors, I just want to reiterate that the frequency. These aren't things that just happen once in a lifetime or here and there. They happen on an almost daily basis. So it's not crying wolf or just nitpicking over petty stuff. It's stuff that happens so frequently and is so entrenched in our culture, and it's not small, and it may seem small and insignificant, but it adds up over time, and the cumulative effects, even of just the microaggressions, can be just as damaging as one extremely violent incident. It all has an impact. So an impact is feeling worthless and dehumanized and invisible and unimportant, like you don't matter. So how do you know how can you recognize when you're on the receiving end of sexual harassment or misconduct? I mean, it's clear if it's something very blatant and extreme, but what about the other kinds of stuff that can be equally damaging? For me, how I can identify when something isn't right is what kind of emotion or feeling I have, and that can range from anything from just feeling kind of icky and creeped out and grossed out and sketched out. You feel uncomfortable. You feel like you just need to get away from the scene. You feel objectified. You feel criticized. And then it starts to escalate to feeling scared and intimidated and like you need to be looking for a way to get out. And then it can go all the way to pure terror, and you're just terrified. So if something doesn't feel right, it's not. So anyways, I brainstormed this list of things that I have experienced. I haven't experienced every single one of these things, but enough of them. And I've also talked with people who have experienced them as well. And I want to stress that perpetrators come from all walks of life. All socioeconomic levels, all racial and ethnic groups, all educational levels, intelligence levels. It's not it's not to do with somebody who doesn't know better. It has to do with sexism and misogyny and what's acceptable ways to treat women, and which are in fact unacceptable. So here are some examples that constitute sexual inappropriateness, misconduct, harassment, assault, rape. And these things are done to women or other victims without their consent, without their will, and against their will and at their expense. Number one, being groped or grabbed on any part of your body, whether it's your genitals or your breasts or your wrists or your throat, especially by a stranger or a group of men, or even by somebody that you know. And an example of that, I have several examples. One example is when I was a student. I was living in Paris, and I was walking down the street to the train, and a group of maybe 5 young men came up behind me. They ran up behind me, and one of them stuck his hand between my legs and jerked me so hard upwards that my feet left the ground and I almost fell. And then another one of the guys grabbed my breasts, and they were calling me names, and they just ambushed me, and then they ran off, and there was nothing I could do. I didn't speak the language that well. If I reported it to the police, what are they going to do? And I'll never forget it, because it caught me off guard. It startled me. It stunned me, and they were laughing and jeering at me, and it was just like a total game to them. And then another example of this, I was walking down a city street when I lived in New York, and I turned a corner down a street where there was a lot of construction going on. So there was a big dumpster, trash dumpster, like industrial size, and then there was a sidewalk, and then there was the building. And so I walked into this narrow space, and this man came up behind me and got right up beside me and grabbed my wrist and said, "I bet you have a really tight pussy." And when I tried to jerk my arm away from him, he held on even tighter and just started saying repulsive sexual things to me. And the more I pulled away, the tighter he held on to my wrist. And I finally had to scream at him and yell at him and jerk away as hard as I could to get away from him. And then of course he runs off. So how do I mean, I can report it, but what are the chances that they're ever gonna find this person? I think I listed like 25 things. So second thing, being slapped or grabbed or pinched on the ass. That has happened so many times to me. I can't even remember them all. Typically it happens in crowded public places, like or in a bar or a nightclub, or on a street or on the subway, and it's typically done by a stranger or a group of men with thinking in group mentality. Being physically cornered. against a wall or in a room or on the street where you cannot get away from the person. You can't step away. They've got you cornered. And they're just maybe just trying to chat you up, or they're actually starting to get really aggressive and creepy, but nonetheless, you find yourself pushed up against, cornered. And I can think of a couple of examples of this. One, in college, I was at a house party and on a balcony. That's where the keg was. And so people were standing on the balcony, and this creepy guy was in my face, and he was violating my personal space, so I kept stepping back. And then, over the course of like 5 minutes, I realized, like, I'm actually backed into a corner here between the sliding glass door and the wall, and I can't, and this dude's getting drunker and creepier, and like I had to push him away from me to get away from him. And no one on the balcony seemed to notice, or and I didn't think to say, hey, could somebody help me out here? And then another example is when I was just getting to know someone off of a dating site, and we were over at his place, and we kissed for the first time, and without asking my permission or letting things evolve slowly and naturally and consensually, he just decides to get on top of me. And of course, I told him to get off, and he didn't like that, and he pinned my wrists back onto the couch cushion. And I had to repeat several times to him to get the fuck off me. And he finally did, thank God. But then, of course, he gets belligerent and angry and starts calling me names and telling me, of course, I'm not that hot anyways, and blah, blah, blah. And basically told me to leave. And so I called the police, of course, afterwards and reported it, and they said they couldn't do anything because it wasn't an actual rape, and I had willingly gone to this guy's house. So it wasn't legally viable. How about being held by the throat or choked? Had this happen when you decide you want to date someone, or you want to get to know them, and you engage in any kind of physical, sexual intimacy, and they just take it upon themselves to grab you by the throat without asking or without your consent, or they just get aggressive, and it just goes from 0 to 60, and before you know it, someone's choking you, and you can't talk when someone's got you by the throat, so you have to push them, and I don't get it. Why would you just assume that someone that you don't know that well, or even if you do know them that well, or you do know them well, wants you to choke them? Having men expose their genitals to you. Whether it's some creepy dude on the street, or it's a joke and it's at a party, or yeah. I would also sending unsolicited or unwanted dick pics or masturbation videos. Yeah. So the first time this happened to me that I can remember, I was in middle school walking home with like 2 or 3 other girlfriends, and we turned into an alleyway that led into our residential neighborhood, and there's this random guy standing there masturbating, and of course we ran away and reported it to our parents, and we talked with the police, but I'm sure they didn't. Who knows if they found him. But it doesn't have to be like some random scary strange dude on the street. Like, this can happen when you're trying to get to know someone and you're getting physically intimate for the first time, but you're not ready to like have sex, or it's too quick, too much too soon, and a man decides that he's just gonna pull his dick out without any kind of conversation or consensual. He just decides that that's what he's gonna do. And so what do you do when somebody does that? Like, hey, I'm not ready for that. I'm not comfortable with that. It's just so presumptuous and rude and gross and scary. And then of course the texting of the, with the smartphones and whatever, you can text and do all these things with pictures and videos, and I have received not a ton, but enough of unsolicited, unwanted sex stuff that I have reported to the dating site, who claimed that they would cancel the guy's profile or account, and then of course I see him pop up in my feed like 4 or 5 weeks later. Yeah. How about when you are fondled or kissed, raped, while you're asleep, or you're too drunk or intoxicated to consent, and to fend somebody off, or you're passed out, or you've been drugged? Luckily for me, I've never passed out or been drugged, and I'm grateful for that. However, I do remember a specific incident where I went to a concert with somebody, and he kept buying me drinks. And I don't know if he put anything in the drinks, but they were strong drinks. And I was trying to drink one cocktail and then one glass of water and pace myself. And I noticed, like, before I could even finish the first drink, he would come up and hand me another, and he was paying for the drinks, of course. And so I got pretty drunk, and I realized, like, I am too drunk and I'm gonna get sick. And I ended up in the bathroom vomiting, and of course he comes to rescue me, and he'll escort me home. I had to leave my car in the parking lot, and this is before I had a smartphone or there was an Uber app or anything like that. And so before I know it, I'm in my home bathroom vomiting, and this basically stranger is holding my hair back, and then of course I need to pee, so then I've got my pants pulled down, and he's right there and tells me that it turns him on. Me not having any pants on is a turn on for him, and I just said, my God, how predatory, like how disgusting and predatory that you're gonna basically get me liquored up and then rescue me. So yeah. Then another classic example, date rape. I've been date assaulted, but not raped. But plenty of people have been date raped. And what's so gross about this is that, if you're really attracted to someone and you're smitten with them, and you want to engage sexually, and you want some physical intimacy, and the person just takes it, and it turns into something beautiful and just morphs into something violent and ugly. And it's just predatory, like taking advantage of someone who you've got within your power and control and violating them. Being gang raped or sexually assaulted. When men decide that they're gonna go on the prowl or the hunt or whatever, and they're just gonna, and they get into the pack mentality and they're gonna gang up on a woman. And one example, it wasn't rape, it was more like an assault. I was only in like 6th or 7th grade, and I decided that I was gonna dress up, it was for Halloween, and I was gonna dress up like a football player. So I had borrowed a football uniform. So I was in full uniform, and I was in like the lunch room area, common area, tons of people around, and this group of guys, I don't even know how many there were, several, tackled me. And once again, grabbed by the crotch, lifted up off the ground, breasts fondled, you know, in a public setting. No one says anything, no one does anything, no one comes to my defense. I don't know if it was visible to the people who saw it happen, but I mean, I'm 13 years old. And nothing happened, by the way. Nothing happened. They weren't punished or called on it or anything. Molestation. So many people molested as infants, young children, adolescents. I've never been, thank God, because talk about psychological damage and what that does to people for the rest of their lives. Being touched or pressed up against or rubbed up against. This happens, oh my God, you live in New York and you're on the train. Your physical boundaries violated left and right every day. And sometimes you can't tell. It's like, was that on purpose, or is this some frauderism? Like, what's going on here? You're on the dance floor and somebody decides they want to grind on you and you're not wanting that. Somebody hugs you a little too hard and a little too long and presses your breasts into their chest, or presses their chest into your breasts. Just, yeah. And that's a gray area one, where it's like something that could be considered just cordial or like a social greeting, and then it starts to feel icky. What are you supposed to do with that, you know? Jerk back, and especially if it's somebody that you know, that's like a family member or a friend or a friend's husband or being ogled or stared at, or where you pass someone and they stop and then they stare you up and down and damn and, ooh, and do stuff like that. That's not a compliment. It's not flirtatious. It's not positive. It's gross. It's creepy. It makes you uncomfortable. It's not flattering. It's disgusting. And I don't understand why the person doing it would think that the receiver would be receptive to it. Being catcalled, especially in a vulgar manner. the times that I've been catcalled weren't nice. It wasn't a compliment. It was vulgar. It was disgusting. And how cowardly for somebody to do that, especially if they're driving by or they're up on some scaffolding or they're with a group of friends, and you know, you think you can just say disgusting, degrading, vulgar things to some stranger walking down the street. Like that's your right to do that. And then of course, if you confront them, you approach that person and say, what's the deal here? Of course it's going to get confrontational, and it's going to escalate, and there's going to be some verbal assault and verbal unpleasant verbal exchange. Being followed, whether someone's following you on foot or they're doing it in a car, that is the most terrifying, creepiest thing. When you realize, no matter where I go in this grocery store or in this huge gym or which street I turn down, this dude's following me, and you're alone? What are you supposed to do? Especially if it's dark, you're in a residential area, there's no, I mean, pre-cell phones, stuff like what do you basically have to run away from the person and lose them, try to shake them off your tail. I mean, you just feel like you're being hunted, which you are. Here's another one. Someone not letting you out of their car or taking you to where you asked to be taken to. So somebody's offering you a ride. An acquaintance, somebody you met at a party. Could be a friend, it could be anyone. But basically you realize, like, this person isn't taking me home, or they're taking a route that's not the right way. They're not following your directions. They're just driving aimlessly. They're trying to chat you up. That's also terrifying. That's also another, when you realize, like, Jesus Christ, I am in this person's car and things could get real ugly and dangerous real fast. And I've been tricked into thinking, oh, I'd like to do a nice favor for you and give you a ride home. And that's not their intention whatsoever. So what do? Jump out of the car, call 911 if being stalked. I've never been stalked, but I have worked with domestic violence victims and perpetrators. This is evil to do to someone, where someone always has to look over their shoulder and be in constant fear of someone who could hurt them at any time. You can't go anywhere without, you have no privacy, and it's not done in a protective or caring way. It's done in a malicious, controlling, power-seeking way, and it creates significant PTSD in people, and it's hard to treat that. And people end up getting attacked or seriously hurt or killed. And I know a lot of people that have been stalked. Being hit on in a very aggressive or forceful manner that's not really flirtatious or romantic. It's like they won't take no for an answer, and they're kind of accosting you, and they're trying to pick you up, and you don't want to be picked up, and they won't fuck off. And so finally you have to say, why don't you fuck off? And then that's going to escalate into, you know, verbal a verbal altercation, and the not taking no for an answer thing, and you can't, I'm entitled to hit on you, and you are must respond favorably. So many times it's happened to me, and I see it happen to other women all the being called a slut or a whore. That's the most basic and frequent default is to call somebody a slut or a whore or crazy, because, you know, if you're going to attack somebody's character, you're going to, you know, cut right to the heart. And, you know, what's worse than being a slut or a whore? You've been reduced to, once again, you've just been reduced to your genitals. You've just been reduced to a disgusting sexual object. Being labeled as promiscuous or loose or slutty. Okay. So when two people have sex, why is one person shamed for it and degraded for it, and the other person praised for it, for their virility and their ability to score and their ability to get women and conquest and do all this? Why is this double standard still in existence? What is with this hypocrisy and this? Why are males traditionally praised and women traditionally ridiculed when two people were engaged in the same act? This is just some draconian leftover thing from religious dogma and just antiquated old-fashioned social values. It's time to let that go. And especially when young people are, what's considered promiscuous is really just young people discovering their sexuality and discovering who they are and needing to have different experiences. It's not promiscuity. Who gets to be the judge of what's promiscuous and what's not? Being sexually pressured and manipulated. This can happen from casual encounters and also with romantic partners. Somebody who won't take no for an answer. Somebody who's not respecting your boundaries, who's not respecting you, and they don't care. They don't care if you're uncomfortable or not into it. And the guilt tripping and the you owe me this and I'm entitled, and no, you're not. Being a sexual conquest or getting sexually conquested. Another ego boosting thing where you sleep with somebody to make yourself feel better, to boost your ego, or to soothe your ego injury or your ego wound, and you use someone else to make yourself feel better with absolute disregard to the consequences. And usually the person who's being used doesn't realize your true intentions until after the fact. And then when they call you on it, well, you consented, like, I don't owe you anything, we're not exclusive, which also leads to being sexually seduced and cajoled, where the person leads you on to think that they're interested in you, not just sex, when in fact that's all they're interested in. This is even more cowardly because you're just flat out lying and manipulating to get what you want, and you don't care about the consequences, and you have no regard for the person, and you don't care what it does to the person afterwards. You're gone, you know, and this person could ruminate that and feel like shit about that for weeks, months, years, especially if they're smitten with you and you took advantage of that. Manipulating somebody under false pretenses, shit. It's a shitty shit thing to do to another human being. And it's not really consensual, is it? If somebody manipulates you under false pretenses and you consent to it because you've been led to believe one thing, but then you discover after the fact that in fact they were lying, is that really, it's not informed consent. Being sexually exploited, so prostitution, sex trafficking, stripping, whatever. I mean, I'm sure people choose to do that stuff for whatever reasons, but I know for a fact that behind the scenes there are a lot of ugly things happening, like addiction, poverty, violence, coercion. I've never been sexually exploited, and so I can't speak for sex workers. I just know from mental health counseling that it's not done just for fun or to empower oneself. It's sex being commodified and sold at a price when in fact you are priceless, you're invaluable, and you're reducing yourself to a sexual commodity and selling it for a price that couldn't begin to cover your worth. And it's dehumanizing. Being sexually solicited. This is an interesting one. Having somebody come literally approach you and ask for sex. It's like, excuse me? Do I look like a... What made you think that that's for sale? Like, why would you even approach me and ask that? I've been sexually propositioned more times than I can even count. And not just by strangers or somebody in a bar or a club, but by peers and colleagues, co-workers. I don't understand why somebody feels so bold and entitled to even ask that of me. I don't, and I always think, well, what did I say or do? What impression did I give off to make them think that I would be interested in that way? And then I realized I didn't. I didn't give that message. The other person just feels entitled to broach that subject in professional settings. And then what? Then you have to work together? How awkward. How awkward is that? Uncomfortable, gross, icky. All right. Being called names in addition to slut and whore. So names that reduce you to your appearance, your physical appearance and your body parts, like big tittied, big assed. I'm gonna go get me some pussy. I'm gonna go get me some ass. Like you're not human. You're just a big vagina or something. I mean, like sex humor and sex jokes and stuff like that, that definitely can be funny. You know, it depends on the context, right? But if somebody's referring to you like that in a derogatory manner, it's just, again, it's dehumanizing and it's reducing you to your body parts. Being treated as greater than or less than, better or worse, based on your perceived sexiness or physical attractiveness. So in other words, if you're hot, then you get preferential treatment, and if you're not hot, then you get treated as less than. Really? So this kills me because this leads to people obsessing about their physical appearance. And they feel like their self-worth, the majority of their self-worth comes from whether or not they're perceived as sexy or physically attractive. And women are held to some pretty unrealistic fucking standards as to what's hot. Who's the hottest of them all, you know? And they feel like in order to be desirable and loved and be someone's girlfriend or wife or partner, as opposed to just some conquest or fling, they need to be hot. And I know why such superficial values are so pervasive. It's media, advertising, it's our culture, but beauty fades over time, and dumb and me are forever. And over time, people are gonna, the beauty, the physical, sexy, hot shit's gonna wear off. And you're gonna start to wonder, well, geez, what do I actually have in common with this person? And do I like them? Do we share the same values? Do we have the same worldviews? Are they nice? Do they care about me? Do I care about them? I mean, it's such a vapid thing, and I hate it. I hate it. Anyway, so the list is endless. I'm sure there are examples that I have forgotten or not experienced, and I would love for people to comment and add their own examples and experiences. And I just want to reiterate that these things that I listed off, these behaviors that are considered so normal and are so pervasive and ubiquitous and entrenched in social norms, that it's not normal behavior. I mean, it occurs like it's normal, but it's abusive. It's hurtful, it's traumatizing, it's ugly, it's hateful, it's repugnant, it's repressive, it's oppressive, dehumanizing, it's sexist, it's misogynistic, it's cruel, it's soul-crushing, and it causes serious psychological and spiritual damage. And I think that that's what, it's not just rude or inconsiderate or in bad taste or crass, it causes serious damage. And I am tired of being at the fucking receiving end of it. And I want the perpetrators to understand the consequences of their behaviors and their attitudes towards women. So anyways, I invite you to comment and to, I don't know, watch my next video. Thanks.